Hello, this is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with two large Zubin Mehta boxes. This one has, 23 CDs, and this one has 38 CDs. And as you might expect, because they come from the same label and the same record company, there is considerable overlap between them. I think there's got to be some therapeutic reason why they do this. I'd like to do something with Seiji Ozawa boxes from Universal, but there are so many of them and they're so duplicative that it's almost impossible. If you're curious, you can read about them on ClassicsToday.com if you have an insider membership. But these Zubin Mehta boxes are enough to make you crazy. Believe me. Let's start with the smaller one. This one came out first. All right? And you can tell from this, see this little silvery thing here, that thing? That means that it came from Italian Universal Italy. For some reason, they seem to function completely independently from the rest of Universal, and they do whatever they want. And there may be some other reason, or I may have that slightly wrong, but that does mean it's an Italian product, this thing. And I don't know. So this thing, it bills itself as symphonies and symphonic poems. Of course, it isn't nearly complete in either category. And a lot of what is in here necessarily comes from the LA Philharmonic box. So this box, let me just tell you what this contains. And I'll also tell you how much comes from Los Angeles. So this way, if you already have this, you'll know whether you want this thing. And if you don't, then you'll know whether you want that thing. I just want to say one thing before I start. I always have these little asides. Zubin Mehta has not really gotten, I think, a lot of the credit he has deserved. I mean, I've written some articles about this and whatnot. And I think that part of the reason could very well be because, like Seiji Ozawa, because he's not European. And for that reason, he was sort of treated as a second fiddle by a lot of the record companies. It could be because also his specialty repertoire, that is, he really was a late romantic, early 20th century kind of guy, was exactly the same repertoire that a lot of other higher profile conductors were doing at the same time. I mean, I think it's a combination of things, but I do think the fact that his nationality has something to do with it. I really do think it has something to do with it, the way he's regarded. I also think the fact that he spent so much of his time in Israel, where he had a wonderful relationship with the Philharmonic there for decades and decades, which is an admirable thing, I think in some respects counted against him. And so, I don't know. I get a feeling, listening to the music, to the quality of the music, that he hasn't quite got what he deserves. Now, of course, there's a huge Sony box of Zubin Mehta out, too, that documents most of his career with the New York Philharmonic, which is in many respects less interesting than this box. Not so much because the performances are inferior as it is because so much of it is given over to accompanying concerto soloists. He sort of became the Eugene Ormandy of the world, I mean, he was the guy everybody did the concerto with. And so you don't really get a sense of what his abilities were, because when he made recordings for Sony with, for example, the Berlin Philharmonic and some of his opera recordings, some of them were just outstanding. I mean, and his Guru Leader, for example, was terrific. And there were some other things like that were really, really fine. And so I'm of the opinion that he still hasn't quite had the chance to strut his stuff. And perhaps he'll still get that opportunity. But anyway, let's talk now about what's in the Italian box, the symphonies and tone poems. You get Beethoven's Seventh, which is with L.A. You get Berlioz's Harold in Italy and the Symphonie Fantastique. One is with Israel, one is with the New York Phil, actually, the Symphonie Fantastique. So you don't have to worry about that. Bruckner 9, of course, was Vienna. The complete Tchaikovsky symphonies were with Los Angeles, along with some of the tone poems, the 1812 Overture and Romeo and Juliet, and this Liszt Les Preludes. I think that was, well, we'll see when we get to the LA box. Then we have Dvorak 7, 8, and 9. 7 was with Israel, 8 and 9 are with Los Angeles. Mahler Symphonies 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, 3 and 5 are with Los Angeles. The Schubert Complete Symphonies, you don't have to worry about. That was with Israel. And then a bunch of Strauss tone poems, Zarathustra, Alpine Symphony, Domestic Symphony, and Einheldenleben, all with Los Angeles. So if you're going to get the Los Angeles box, you're going to get a lot of what's in here. And that's all I'm going to say about this one, because this is earlier, and I really want to talk about the big box, which we're going to cover disc by disc. And it really, all 38 of them, get ready, guys. And it really is, I'm amazed by how enjoyable the whole thing is. I mean, there was a reason people were recording this guy. He was really good. The orchestra was really good, and they had very good sonics. I mean, it was really taken together as a box where you can appreciate the whole achievement. It really is an achievement. You know, I mean, you don't think about it that much because we're so used to thinking everything he did is sort of second best. But even though you may have favorite performances of all these works, and you may find, you know, that he's not as good as so-and-so or something, the issue is, considering this as a set in totality, is it of high quality? And the fact is, it is amazingly consistently good. It really, really is. You can basically dip into it just about anywhere and find something enjoyable and really like what you're hearing. But let's go through it case by case, disc by disc, and we'll see. All right, it starts out with Beethoven's Seventh, the Egmont Overture, and the Emperor Concerto with Alicia de la Rocha. It's Beethoven's Seventh. It's not going to win any awards. The Emperor with La Rocha was good, but not fabulous, I think. The Egmont Overture, that's pretty good. But, you know, let's face it, there's too much competition in that for us to bother with. But here we start with Liszt tone poems. Now, Mehta was always a terrific conductor of Liszt tone poems. There's some on Sony, too, and they're really, really good. And so is this. You get Hunenschlacht. Remember, we just did the Liszt tone poems? Isn't that fun? You get a great Hunenschlacht. Really exciting. And Orpheus and Mazeppa. The three of them. And they are quite good. Absolutely first rate. Then we get the Saint-Saëns Organ Symphony. I think this is a terrific Saint-Saëns Organ Symphony. I really do. By the way, they are obviously increasing the number of discs by making original jackets so that you don't have to couple works, you know, together in a way which economizes, which tells you that the record labels have finally woken up to what they're giving away. But unfortunately, this makes for very short playing time for some of these. It doesn't bother me terribly, but you should just be aware of it. This is a really good organ symphony. I mean, it really is. Sounds terrific. It's. I got no complaints. Bruckner 4. Always a really good Bruckner 4. You know, Mehta's a great Bruckner conductor. Remember, his 9th in Vienna was fabulous, and this 4th is really good, too. It's beautifully paced. It's wonderfully played. It's a lovely performance. And I just remember seeing reviews of it, and everyone saying, oh, yeah, it's really, really good, but then everyone just forgot about it. Why is that? I don't know. I don't get it. Let's see. And this is the L.A. Bruckner 8th. He remade the 8th. I think it was with the Israel Philharmonic for Sony. This is the better of the two. And it's 78 minutes and 52 seconds. This guy is a great Bruckner conductor. I mean, he was trained in Vienna. He knows Bruckner. Why does no one ever listen to this? I enjoyed this. I really did. Hearing it again. Verdi's 4 Sacred Pieces. Lovely performances, music that no one particularly cares about. You do get Yvonne Minton, who is a lovely contralto soloist. Another one of those. She's kind of like the Zubin Mehta of contraltos in that she never did anything that was really bad, but nobody ever talks about her. She's a fine Australian contralto. You know, she did the alto solo in the Schulte das Lied von der Erde, which is marvelous. So it's good to hear her in these. Mussorgsky, Pictures at an Exhibition, the orchestral version by Ravel, and Ashkenazi playing the piano version. This is better for Ashkenazi. This is one of the few disappointing sort of blockbuster releases. I don't know what happened, but the sonics in the pictures in an exhibition, particularly in the Great Gate of Kiev, were never very good. So we could do better. Well, and here's a good deal. You get Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture, Romeo and Juliet, and the Fourth Symphony. He did the Fourth Symphony twice. He did it initially, and then he remade them all in the context of the whole symphony cycle. He remade it again, and Mehta's a really good Tchaikovsky conductor. We don't care these days about really good Tchaikovsky conductors, do we? No one seems to care about Tchaikovsky at all anymore anyway, and it's rather sad because he's a great composer. And this was a really, really fine Tchaikovsky cycle. And again, it's one no one talks about. It really is kind of shocking, but people don't talk about it. You had Bernstein's and Karajan's and then Haitink's and, but Mehta's it's a contender. It's a contender. So I think the other Tchaikovsky symphonies are coming up shortly. And let us see where they are. Okay, now we get CDs 9 and 10. Yes, Tchaikovsky 1, Tchaikovsky 2, Tchaikovsky 3, Tchaikovsky 4, Tchaikovsky 5, Tchaikovsky 6. That's CDs 9, 10, and 11. First-rate Tchaikovsky cycle. It really, really is. It's passionate, it's impulsive, it's romantic and warm and fun and emotional, and it's got all the things you want in Tchaikovsky. It's exciting. I enjoy this. I still do. It was out in the little slim Tchaikovsky Symphony Cycle Decca box with Mehta's Tchaikovsky generally, and it's always been one of the good ones. It really has, and it still is. So there you go. Scheherazade. See, here's one I never even bothered listening to again when I did my Scheherazade survey, because how many Scheherazades can you listen to? Realistically, let's face it. And second of all, the box hadn't come out again yet, and my other Zubin Mehta stuff is not here. And this is a very, very good, colorful, brilliantly played, splendidly recorded Scheherazade. I'm going to keep saying that over and over again. Dvorak 8. But what's fun about this, in addition to getting the 8th, is that you get the wood dove. Now, no one was doing Dvorak tone poems when Mehta did the wood dove. Remember that? I just remember the wood dove. And it turns out that the 8th Symphony is quite good also. But I really loved the wood dove. It was so nice to hear it in another performance because I didn't really know the works. Remember back in the 70s, and you couldn't get the Dvorak tone poems very easily. Kertész did some of them, and Kubelik did some of them, and he did something very strange with the wood dove. I have to tell you, he substituted a snare drum for a tambourine, because often in scores, composers simply write tamb period as an abbreviation, and so the question is it a tamburo, which is a snare drum, or a tamburino, which is a tambourine? And it's supposed to be a tambourine, but Kubelik did that a lot. And Laurent Mazel did it in his recording of the planets in France at the end of Jupiter, where you have this, tambourine roll, and it's going dum bum ba bum ba da dum ba da bum ba ba da 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 crash boom. The end of Jupiter. He does a snare drum roll. Conductors, go figure. Anyway. And now we get, the New World Symphony with the Carnival Overture. Also, this was a performance that was always highly regarded. I remember people thinking it was a real contender at the time because it's just exciting and very well played and it sounds very good. Now we get to the Strauss tone poems. And once again, now Mehta has done Strauss his whole life, and he has always been a superb Strauss conductor. There's a wonderful disc, with the Berlin Philharmonic he did of opera intermezzi and sort of unusual Strauss. That's very, very much worth having. But anyway, you get Zarathustra on this one, and Don Quixote, and Heldenleben, and they're all big and rich and bold and gutsy and Straussy. There's a lot to be said. It's funny when you look back in the day when these things came out, and you had there was Reiner and there was Karajan, and everyone's like, it's another Strauss. Everyone's doing Strauss. Nowadays, when everyone is still doing Strauss, but they seem to have, so many conductors are doing it, and so many of them are just mediocrities, and they don't have that romantic ebullience, that gusto, that opulence, and these performances have it. And so while they may not have been, like I said, the greatest Strausses in their day, they sound awfully good in our day. Once your ears are full of all the stuff that's been coming by people who really have no business conducting it. Now, let us continue. The Sinfonia Domestica, not a piece you heard every day. And, these performances were valuable because they were done in such good sound. You had other performances of the Domestica too, for example, but you could have Zell or Reiner and those people. They did it, but here we had new shiny Decca recordings, and they sounded really good from Royce Hall in L.A. And Alpine Symphony. This was the biggie. This was always the performance that everybody talked about when they talked about Mehta Strauss, because the recording was gorgeous and because there were just so few recordings of an Alpine Symphony. And, the Böhm was in mono. Karajan didn't do it till he got around to the digitals, and then it didn't sound too good. Kempis stuff was not available here, at least in the U.S. You couldn't find great Alpine symphonies. And then this showed up, and everyone listened to it. It was a demo disc for a long time. And now, of course, with new digital recordings, people say, well, it doesn't sound as good as it used to. And it doesn't. It doesn't. But it still sounds pretty damn good. It really does. And it's a terrific performance. Again, it's just a no-holds-barred, go for the gusto, beautiful performance of a work that, at the time the disc came out, was as good as unknown. And to the extent it was known, it was completely disparaged. And when this came out, it was still disparaged, but it became known, and that's the point. Let's see, what do we have here? The Mahler 3. Now, he did this a couple times, this symphony a couple times too, but this LA one is very, very good. It has Maureen Forrester singing the alto solos. What's not to love? And it really is better than his remake, which I believe was with the Israel Philharmonic on Sony. It was considered when it came out second best to, the usual culprits, right? But I got news for you. This Mahler 3 is better than a lot of the other ones out there. It really is, particularly in the opening movement, and it has a beautiful concluding adagio. It really does. Mahler 5. Now, Mehta's New York Philharmonic Mahler 5 for Teldec is probably better than this one. Probably better than this one. But again, how many conductors botch Mahler 5? They just blow it. He never blew it. He always does a very good Mahler 5. The Mahler Symphony is probably the hardest of all of them to bring off. So there you go. I'm starting to sound very mechanical, and I'm sorry. I love this disc. This is the Songs of a Wayfarer and the Rückert with Marilyn Horne. Now, on Eloquence, you could also get the Kindertotenlieder. Those were conducted by Henry Lewis, Marilyn Horne's husband. But these are great. Some people object to Marilyn Horne's voice in this music, but, Ich bin der Welt abhanden gekommen was her favorite song ever. She wants it sung at her funeral, and she sings these things so fabulously. If you don't like her voice, well, you're not going to like her voice here. But if you do like her voice, these are some of the great Mahler recordings ever made, the Mahler Lieder. Oh, yeah. Another recording that got a lot of love in its day. This was a ferociously exciting Rite of Spring. Fabulously well played by the LA Players, and it comes with the 8 instrumental miniatures, the opposite of the Rite of Spring. You might call it the wrong of spring. And first rate, still sounds first rate. Mehta always delivered a terrific Rite of Spring. He recorded it at least twice more. There was a Sony one, and then there was I believe a Teldec one too. It was a piece that he did extremely well. And he did one, I think, there's a live one on Orfeo with the Vienna Philharmonic. Did he do? Yeah, he did that. He does a great Rite of Spring. You can always count on his Rite of Spring. The Planets, first rate. Also a sonic blockbuster disc that everybody always loved. Very, very fine, exciting, as good as any of them out there, basically. Daphnis and Chloe, Second Suite, Mother Goose, and La Valse. These were, now we're into the, Mehta blockbuster period. Again, great Ravel. I'm not going to say any more about it because, there's no point unless I turn these things backwards and sideways and upside down. I don't know what I did. This was an interesting one. Nielsen 4. How many people were doing that when this came out? And it's very, very, very good. It's quite successful. I always enjoyed this Nielsen 4. I have to say, this performance I always knew well. And it was one of the ones that, when I couldn't get my hands on the Martinol Chicago one because it disappeared rather quickly, this was a very good alternative. It's a forward-looking, exciting, first-rate performance with terrific timpani in the finale. Gotta have that. Ives 1, and then the Enigma Variations. The Enigma Variations is first rate. It's a piece that Mehta does with complete confidence and conviction. The Ives 1 is not recommendable. It's cut, unfortunately. And in the finale, it was one of the early recordings of the work, and no one knew it or knew what to do with it. So he cut it. And, it's no longer competitive. And now I have the last handful. So hang on. We are getting there, folks. We're getting there. I promise you. More Charles Ives. This is, let's see, Symphony Number 2, Decoration Day, from the Holiday Symphony, the Variations on America. This is good. This is good. Now, once again, I keep saying this, and I'm sorry this is so repetitious, but the same issue comes up again and again. Bernstein had done Ives 2. That was the Ives 2 everyone had to get. And Ormandy did Ives 2 as well, rather slowly. But he did it. And then there was this one, the other Ives 2. Perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. Excellent disc. This was still a specialty, unique disc, Copland's Lincoln Portrait, with, let's see, who's talking in this one? Oh, Gregory Peck. Yay. Gregory Peck does a great job. And then William Kraft, the Concerto for 4 Percussion Soloists, and Contextures, Riots, the 60s. This was the obeisance to modern music that everybody had to do, but not everybody did them this well. The Kraft stuff is worth having and worth hearing, and it's still maybe of its time a little bit, but lots of fun to listen to, and it's played to the nines. Here we have Bernstein, Candide Overture, An American in Paris by Gershwin, Copland's Appalachian Spring. I mean, the orchestra knows this music. Mehta knows this music. First class. Just first class. All the way. Oh, this one I loved. Verklärte de Nacht and the Poem of Ecstasy. One of those discs that was never going to sell many copies, was it? These are terrific. Verklärte de Nacht is really sexy. It's somewhat on the slow side. It's 31 minutes? It's competitive. It usually runs 29 to 31 minutes. I personally detest the piece. I really do. But I can recognize a good performance when I hear one. And this is a good one. And the Scriabin Poem of Ecstasy, which is one of the 2 or 3 most annoying pieces of music ever written. A friend of mine always called it, how to torture your trumpeter, because it's going, yeah, da 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 da. Just wails and whines and moans and pants. Well, it does. And it does it very well. This is great too. Remember this? Wow. See? I mean, I'm looking at, this is like a trip down memory lane for me. I mean, I'm cheating a little because I went through this whole thing and listened to a lot of it again before I gave you this talk. I've had it for a couple of weeks and I've been listening and trying to remember it. But, Schoenberg, Chamber Symphony Number 1, and the Variations, the orchestral variations. No one was recording. This was the only way to get this stuff domestically for a long, long time. I mean, yes, Schoenberg came and went in the catalog, and this came and went in the catalog. But again, this was, from Mehta's wheelhouse, from his training in Vienna, and he knew and played this music with extraordinary sympathy. And the LA Phil was a great orchestra before Giulini and Esa-Pekka Salonen got their hands on them. Give Mehta credit for keeping them in tip-top shape. And this was a disc that sort of showed that what he did and what he could do. It's first rate. Lots of fun. And this one I had. This was like one of the ones I played through the grooves. Our Varese, Arcana, Integral, and Ionization. Yeah, this was fun. There were only a few really great Varese recordings out when I was a kid, such as they were. One of them was Martinol's, because he did Arcana too. And then there was this one, because I mean, a new Verez disc was a big, big, big deal. You didn't see his stuff very often, and there were older ones that sounded grotty, and and then Boulez came along and did all that stuff, and so again, it sort of wiped out the memory of these things because our memories are so short, aren't they? It's not really fair when you think about it. And now we get John Williams, Star Wars, Close Encounters from the Hollywood Orchestra playing Hollywood music, and it doesn't get any better than this. I mean, they're fabulous. Everybody loved this. It sold 1 billion copies. Everyone was very happy. Let's see, hits from the Hollywood Bowl. Oh, this is just a fun record to listen to. You get Bolero, somewhat quick Bolero, 13 minutes and 50 seconds. March Slav, which is wonderful. Carmen excerpts. Verdi's La Forza del Destino, and The Poet and Peasant Overture by Franz von Suppe. Does anyone ever play that music anymore? They should. It's good music. Terrific disc, too. Virtuoso Overtures. Here we go. You ready? Die Fledermaus, The Marriage of Figaro, La Gazza Ladra, The Thieving Magpie by Rossini, Der Freischutz, and Rienzi, which you didn't hear all that often too. We had basically like Klemperer and this, and a few others, sort of hanging around. I like overture collections. I mean, well put together overture collections are a joy because you get lots of contrast and lots of variety within a smallish space, and that's exactly what this disc has. And finally, we get concertos in contrast. This is a very interesting disc featuring soloists from the LA Phil. You get the Haydn Trumpet Concerto and Vivaldi's Piccolo Concerto and Weber's Concertino for Clarinet and Wieniawski's Polonaise No. 1 and Scherzo Tarantella. You're not going to hear this stuff very often, are you guys? Wonderful performances highlighting the soloists of the Philharmonic, and what fun it is. It's just one of those schmooze records where everyone gets together and has a good time and doesn't worry so much about things like textural fidelity or emotional depth or any of those things that get in the way of music sometimes. And that's the end of it, 38 discs. Now, I, come away from this thinking to myself, it's hard to make the recommendation because, like I said, everyone's going to have their favorite performance of most of this music, and most of it is not going to be these. But if you want a consistently fine, really smart, enjoyable box, I mean, it gave me so much pleasure to hear these again. Even while I was thinking, okay, this isn't the Nielsen Fourth of my dreams, or I know that someone else's Tchaikovsky I like better. I like these too. That's the point. It's not like you're going to listen to any of these and go like, God, it's horrible. It's not. They're really, really good. They're all enjoyable performances. They go down easily. And I think that that counts for something. I'm very happy to have this box. I think you probably would be too. I mean, Mehta is a major conductor, a major artist, and he's left a recorded legacy of serious distinction that's wholly admirable, and I'm happy to say so without qualification. I mean, just another reason for us to keep on listening. So give Zubin Mehta a shot. He may surprise you. Take care. Bye-bye.